I want to say hello and good morning and welcome to all of you from around the world. This is another edition of Soulivity Today, broadcasting live from our studio right here in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and on KMET 1490 AM radio in Southern California. My name is Brian Westley Johnson, and I'm so glad that you're here today. We have a great show, a great topic. But before I get to that, I want to introduce to you some friends of mine. Our amazing co-host, Sheila Applegate, host of Consciously Awesome Living right here on Soulivity TV, and Sinead O'Brien, the director of the Racial Fairness in Berkshires. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Brian. Hello.
How are you guys feeling this morning?
I'm feeling pretty good. Had a great day yesterday and ready to get into things today.
What about you? Sinead? How are you doing this morning?
I'm feeling great. I'm excited to jump into this topic. I'm a little sad. My son is starting 5th grade, which is of course bittersweet, but otherwise I'm feeling fantastic.
Oh, that's so wonderful, right? I mean, that's such a special time. I mean, getting closer and closer to being that young man and growing up and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, he's a beautiful little boy. Yep.
Ah, man. Well, listen, why don't we jump right in, because we've got a robust topic today, to say the least. So, I'll ask this question: what makes education important? What are the characteristics that make up a viable, inspirational, and aspirational learning environment for kids? Do our public schools have an obligation to create a robust and diverse group of educated citizens? Well, today's discussion is focused on these questions and the current dispute going on at Thomas Jefferson High School, located within the Fairfax County public school system. Now, the school itself has had a robust history of excellence, even ranking as #1 high school in America in 2020. But in the wake of the death of George Floyd, the school administrators decided that the school needed to be more diverse. You see, for decades, Black and Hispanic students have been woefully underrepresented, while first white Americans and then Asian Americans made up the overwhelming majority of the student body. So the school made attempts to change its admission policy, I think something like 8 times over the last decade. And then over time, it created a policy that they call race neutral. Now, you would think that in the midst of the latest ruling from the United States Supreme Court striking down affirmative action policies, which is another discussion that needs to be had, people would be overjoyed with such a move. But sadly, no, this is not the case. Members of the same organization which supported ending affirmative action and was part of the lawsuit have banded together with members of the community to oppose this new policy, saying that it is discriminating against Asian Americans and that it is a racial proxy in disguise. Here's the latest on the story. We want to thank CBS News for this very thorough report.
A group of parents in Virginia have asked the Supreme Court whether or not an admissions policy meant to diversify one of the country's top public schools is racially discriminatory.
The group, called the Coalition for TJ, is accusing Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology of racially discriminating against Asian American students.
Now, the accusations stem from a new admissions process meant to increase Black and Hispanic enrollments, leading to a decrease in Asian American students. This comes 2 months after the court rejected affirmative action banning colleges from considering race as a factor in admissions. So what's happening here? We're joined now by Sheila Cashin. She's an author and law professor there at Georgetown. Sheila, help us understand this case a bit more, because I understand it's been an ongoing battle between this parents group and TJ High School. Give us a bit of background there.
Right. So TJ is virtually the #1 public school in the country. For years, they've had underrepresentation of Blacks and Latinos. After George Floyd's murder, like many other institutions, the school board that governs the school decided to rethink its admissions policy with the hopes of expanding access. And under the old system, a majority of the students at TJ came from a very limited number of elite middle schools in Fairfax County, one of the wealthiest counties in the state. But it just so happens that the attendance zone of TJ covers 6 jurisdictions, much broader, and there are citizens who can't afford to buy their way into Fairfax who subsidize and pay taxes for TJ. So what did they do? They adopted a new system that guaranteed that every single middle school in TJ's attendance zone could send the top 1.5% of their students to TJ. And then with the remaining 100 places, they scrapped a high stakes test and decided to look at everybody, evaluate everybody based on GPA, a problem solving exercise. And they gave extra points, a plus factor, not based on race, but on low income, or if you came from an underrepresented school, you were an English language learner, or you had a special education situation, right? And what happened was, yes, the Asian representation went down, but low-income Asians actually went way up in their representation. And yes, the representation of Blacks and Latinos and poor students went up. Asian parents sued, that benefited under the old policy, sued. But the Court of Appeals, the Fourth Circuit, looked at the record and said there was no evidence whatsoever that the school board intentionally was discriminating against Asians. What they were trying to do was broaden access.
Professor Cashin, it's really interesting hearing all those details about what went into the thinking of it. I'm wondering, the fact that this is a public high school, does that affect anything in the calculation about really whether or not this is going to be part of, whether it fits into sort of this larger debate about affirmative action in colleges and universities? Might it actually have an impact in whether the Supreme Court or other schools look to this as a benchmark?
Well, all public institutions, all state actors have to comply with the 14th Amendment of the Constitution to treat citizens equally and give them equal protection of the law. So in theory, if 4 justices on the court want to take this case and consider whether this utterly race-neutral new admissions policy somehow involved racial discrimination, yes, the court could take it. There are 3 justices. There was an emergency appeal at the time that this policy was adopted, and 3 justices, Clarence Thomas, Justice Alito, and I believe Justice Gorsuch, indicated that they wanted to take the case. All they need is one more justice, and that would be either Amy Coney Barrett, or Justice Barrett, or Justice Kavanaugh, or Justice Roberts, among the 6 conservatives. If just one more justice says they want to review it, they will. I think that Justice Roberts is not likely to have much appetite for having another huge affirmative action case 1 year later. We will see.
Very interesting. Professor Sheila Cashin, thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
Woo! Sheila, I'll go to you first. What are your thoughts right now about this story, just broadly?
Well, I think the admission policy is incredible and life-changing, if society changing, if we could move to such an admissions policy where we're looking at not looking at race, but the factors that may limit people, including testing. I mean, you're opening it up for all kinds of different learners, critical thinking, being able to think and solve problems. Like, this is what I would want education to be about. And then naturally, that creates a more diverse community when we look at all different types of learning. So to me, it would be really exciting if every school followed this in general. But as far as the fight against it, to me, it's just old money trying to pit people together again, against each other.
Right. Sinead, what about you?
I think this might be. I know this case predates the Supreme Court case that just came out, but I think this could be a really good example of the law of unintended consequences. What we're seeing here is what's happening is they're applying these race neutral standards exactly as the conservatives wanted them to do. And lo and behold, they're getting more diversity. So it's one of those things like, what do you want? So I think it's more like, it's a mess around and find out kind of thing.
Right.
I guess.
That's the edited version. We know the real version, Sinead. We know the real version.
Yeah.
Just to kind of again put some finer points about that as we come to break. As I said before, the holistic review process replaced an old structure that asked interested students to sit for a two-part, much feared and rigorous exam in the fall and winter of their 8th grade year. And then the school board voted in October of 2020 to eliminate that test, as well as the $100 application fee. Now, the revised admission process is the most radical change that Thomas Jefferson has seen since its founding in 1985, although school officials have made other adjustments at least 8 times over the past decade. So this isn't new, right? This has been something that has been part of TJ's history in terms of trying to find ways to have a more diverse student body, so that as people graduate, you're having a more educated and diverse community, which makes sense. Listen, we're going to take a quick break, ladies, but don't worry, we've got even more Soulivity today coming up. So stay right there, and we'll see you in a couple minutes. Soulivity Today is brought to you by Happy Travelers Tours and Old Vine Wine Tours. Satana products at our Go shop at go.soulivity.com.
Have you ever asked the question, if I was to be anything, what would I be? Regardless of money, regardless of status, beyond popularity and fame. Living your passion, feeling your life has purpose. Soulivity is a space to nurture that which lives in all of us. A place where work can become play, and doing what we love creates the dreams of a lifetime.
Hello there. We're back with more here on Soulivity Today as we talk about the fight against race-neutral admissions policy at Thomas Jefferson High School in Virginia. And so, you know, I have my very special guest Sheila and Sinead with me today. You know, I know this is as I ask this question, I'm even like, why am I asking this question? But it's a good question to ask. And that is, do we really need to move away from affirmative action policies to race-neutral policies? I'll go to you, Sinead, on this. Take some time. I mean, if, you know, I really want to hear what you have to say.
You know, I mean, that is such a complicated question. I think
Exactly.
I think the not even muted distress we heard across the country when that Supreme Court case came down, that would explain, I think, how a lot of the country feels that you can no longer have it in college admissions. That
Right.
people do feel that it's incredibly important still. I mean, you know, a certain sector of the country was, I know I overuse this term, but pretty outraged.
Right.
That it's now that it's verboten. They can't use it. But as I slightly alluded before, these race neutral might kind of swing the fulcrum that way also. So it's one of those things. Maybe policies are what's causing the quote unquote problems that people are having issues with.
Right.
I just, you know, like the over legislating, the over policizing, you know.
Right.
I don't
Right.
know. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe it's the
it's
policies.
hard.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
all of these ticking the boxes and making sure things, rather than taking the long view and stepping back and saying kind of what Sheila was saying before, like students that are, you know, oh, wow, we have a really gifted student here who can, you know, solve this problem, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe if, you know, the blind admissions, it is
Right.
hard. I don't know. I wish I
Yeah.
did.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to ask this question, because it's in part complicated. I'll give you guys my thoughts in a second, but Sheila, what are you thinking about this question? And what do you think?
Like I said in the first segment, I really like the race neutral policies. And we had a show when the decision came down about affirmative action. And,
Yeah.
you know, one of the things we talked about is there are areas even, you know, in college where if we took the alumni advantage away, right, that there's been systems in place to keep the certain type of people in these schools and places that they could most easily move up into that elite, right? So to me, there was this underlining feeling like, well, you know, affirmative action has been politicized, has had, you know, time to have all the false stories placed on it. And, you know, to move into something like race neutral, because race is a construct that was created. It's not real. And United States is one of the strongest countries to enforce that idea. I
Right.
mean, I always go back to Caste, the book, when we
Oh
realized that
man.
Nazi Germany
Yeah.
came from the race structure of America. So moving beyond that and realizing that people learn in different ways, people express their intelligence in different ways,
Right.
people with access to certain things are going to have an ability to do things because they had
Hmm.
access to it. So to me, this is ideal, and if I
Right.
go to a personal level, my daughter had a learning disability, but because I had been a child therapist, I knew what was going on. I jumped in, and as soon as they were allowed to test her, I jumped in. She would have been overlooked if I hadn't been there, right? So if schools
Right.
could
Right.
change, and hers was her disability. She qualified just because her IQ and her performance had a big enough gap. She was still performing on average, but when you checked the difference. So to me, those little nuances, if we could
Yeah.
start paying attention to all children that way,
Right.
we could
Right.
have a completely different society. And I love that when we do this, it shows that diversity naturally forms.
Loving what both of you are saying here. And my thoughts are kind of like a blend of both. I think, as a African American man, I have to always go back to history. Affirmative action was always framed as a solution for race discrimination, right? Specifically,
Mm-hmm.
which was happening. No doubt about it. It was happening across America. Even in my own research in my father's life, he had to go to certain schools for higher education because they were the only schools available, right?
Right.
There was no colleges and universities outside of historically Black colleges that were admitting Black students, right? And so there was no opportunity. So affirmative action, as it's framed, was a solution for, because there was literally zero at colleges and universities around the country. And so they basically had to say, no, you've got to at least let in this percentage of qualified applicants. Now, over years, that's how it's been. Race. We never talked about, and there was never been the discussion until recent times, that affirmative action was already happening within the white community, right? And that even
Mm-hmm.
as more Blacks and brown people and Asian Americans and indigenous were going to school, what was happening was that colleges and universities were shoring up the affirmative action for white enrollees, including those in certain, high schools that were rated #1 and all that kind of stuff across the country. So now we have a situation where, again, the discussion is about race specific. So even this coalition for TJ is making it about race because they do not want you to make it about the other aspects that both of you are talking about, right? Which is mainly around socioeconomic status, right? Which then goes to the quality of the schools that people are attending, right? Regardless of the intelligence level, regardless of the capability of the student, right? And I've seen brilliant students, children in underrepresented neighborhoods and disadvantaged neighborhoods that don't get a chance to realize their potential because of the education that they're receiving. And once they're giving a chance to come into a school that is rigorous with a little bit of support, they succeed because they have the capability to do so. Just want to kind of end this segment. Yeah, go ahead, Shanae.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to very quickly add one thing. I think the quick irony to this is that as the schools they're moving away from affirmative action and race conscious because they're being forced to, because of our major shift in consciousness to what's going on. George Floyd. Everyone says George Floyd, and we're Black Lives Matter. Because of the work that I do and what I'm seeing, and I'm on a couple of boards, we are seeing that everybody suddenly is like, how do I have more diversity on my board? What do I do? What do I do?
Right.
So what we're seeing there is tokenism. So, and I constantly am like, please, please be very thoughtful in what you're doing. Do not get that token Black,
Right.
brown, Asian person because you
Right.
feel the need to have a little color. So
Right.
it's a weird shift, and it's not going to serve our community well. So
And
that's what
yeah,
I just
and just really quickly too, I know we're running a little bit over in this segment, but I want people to really go to and look at the admissions policy that's currently in place, that's being disputed for Thomas Jefferson. That process, all the students have to have a GPA of 3.5. All the students. So these aren't like run of the mill, kind of like, oh well, they're failing and all this, and they're letting in people who letting in children that are not deserving. I mean, whatever the heck that means. These are high performing kids, and so basically
and
what they're
not
trying to
only
do, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and and while they did cap at all the middle schools in the district and county, they take the top, whatever top from each of them. So nobody's being left
Absolutely.
out. Nobody's being left
Absolutely.
out.
Nobody is being left out. So you got to ask the question, why are they doing it? And so with that, listen, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, we'll even have more on this subject with Soulivity Today. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
6 years ago, when I started Soulivity, my vision was to support everyone in improving their life through the discovery of their passion and purpose, so they could become the best version of themselves, to battle fear and ignorance, and create a better world today. Get inspired to live your passion and purpose. Visit Soulivity.com now.
And we're back with more of Soulivity Today. We took a real quick break. We are talking about the race-neutral admissions policy at one of the top high schools in America. It's Thomas Jefferson High School here near where we live here in DC. It's in Fairfax County. Ladies, I want to kind of just start this discussion with a little more about the Thomas Jefferson Action alumni group. This is the group that actually formed to support creating a more diverse and inclusive student body. It's a group of more than 1,000 alumni of Thomas Jefferson, so that's one. And their mission statement reads that it seeks to enhance accessibility, inclusion, and innovation within STEM education in order to develop well-rounded and ethical 21st century leaders. They're focused on driving change in the following areas to achieve its core objectives: redesigning Virginia's governor schools admission process to be more equitable and result in representation that make up of the respective draw districts, increasing and providing constant, effective access to all communities to resources and messaging that recruits and prepares kids for specialty programs, advanced academics, and experiential opportunities. And finally, mandating an anti-racist curriculum that includes more resources and support for underrepresented groups to provide a healthy learning environment for all Virginia students. Now, I don't know if, I'm almost ready to start singing some Negro hymns on that, because that sounds fantastic to me.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't understand, again, I understand it from a political sense, but I don't understand it from an ethical and community-based sense where, okay, you're trying to create a diverse community of educated people. So you have to make sure that you're educating all of the people that are there that are ready for it, right? Not just throwing people in the mix who fail, but people who actually have shown, students that have actually shown that they can stand a rigorous curriculum and not just based on test scores, because that's just one small aspect of a student's ability to perform. Question, and Sinead, I'll go to you on this. what are some, because you've been watching this case for a long time, what are some of the important aspects that people need to really hone in on and consider?
Well, I think again, what's important is that when you are making the choice to shift toward these race neutral policies, you need to be very, very careful that you appreciate the consequences. Now, again, this is secondary education. This school did not have any mandate to do so. They did this on their own. And what they did, this was kind of over a course of time, and they landed at a really beautiful way to be inclusive. And by making this kind of across the board inclusive thing that is asking for academic merit and socioeconomic status, what they've ultimately done is lead to an increased minority representation. And the problem is, I think, people are being very, very upset because what that ultimately did is it's leaving out just one specific group, or they seem to think it's carving out a wedge for other people to come in. So the thing that we need to think about here is this is an access versus exclusion. And we're meant to think that access is when you don't have affirmative action, as that dirty term is. The problem that they have there is that we're reducing access, right? People say, oh, if you have affirmative action, you're saying that my student who is just as qualified doesn't get a seat at the table. Well, in this situation, we're saying everybody who's qualified gets a seat at the table. Now, the flip side is there's a group of parents who are saying, no, wait a minute, because, right? But the most important thing to consider here, and this is what I don't think all the bells are being rung here. This isn't a private college. This isn't even a state college. This isn't a choice.
Ding, ding, ding,
right?
ding.
This is high school, people. This is high school. Now, granted, it's a magnet school, so it is it's something that they get to go to because they are gifted, etc. But you know what? That's why we should be giving every opportunity for these gifted students. We should be watershed. If these students, number one, there should be absolutely no fee for testing. I'm so happy they ended that. I mean, there should be no financial barriers to a public education. So, like I said, we're really, the most important things to understand here is that we are making things absolutely more accessible to everybody. There are no placeholders here for specific races, sexes, gender. It's just shocking to me that anybody would be really upset. Oh, one more thing I have to say. The big issue of the people who are filing this lawsuit, they're calling it discrimination by proxy. Or race by proxy, sorry. You know what's so funny to me is I guarantee there is a group of people, these people who are filing this lawsuit, I doubt they all got together one night at their local Starbucks and was like, let's file this lawsuit. I'm sure they were approached by a very powerful, wealthy group and said, are you guys willing to be our plaintiff? So talk about proxy.
And Sheila, that goes to, I think that you said earlier that I want you to repeat, but in more detail. We're not going to take a break. We're just going to go through where you were talking about the fact that this coalition for TJ was formed by the same organization that's funded by some conservatives that opposed affirmative action.
Right. And, it's very clear when you look behind the curtain and see the wizard.
Yeah.
It's the Koch Network, Exxon and Mobil Foundation,
Yeah.
Adolf Coors Foundation, Dunn's Foundation, and Advancement of Right Thinking. And then I went into, and Sarah Scafie Foundation. And so I looked up the ones I didn't know. And it is a clear picture of early white settler money trying to stay in power. And this
Right.
is the perfect scheme for them to bring to the surface because it can confuse us. And we
Right.
saw right in the stats, the Asian population didn't get reduced significantly. The rich Asian population got reduced.
Right.
And by
Exactly.
saying that this is a parent coalition, and this to them, it's like the vultures coming in. Well, we have this opportunity to say it's race when it's
Right.
not race at all.
It's not race.
And to make the people who are already minorities feel like their life is being threatened. And that's the whole backdrop of our society. There
right,
you go.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. Because I want people to understand the greater dynamics of what is happening here. If you go to the official Coalition for TJ site, they mention 3 Asian Americans as leaders of the coalition, where they are the co-founders and this kind of thing. But they don't mention who's behind it, right? They don't mention who's the leadership behind the website, behind the money, behind all that kind of stuff. They don't mention that at all. So that's one. 2, as both of you kind of were mentioning before, before this went into place, Asian Americans at Thomas Jefferson made up about 70 to 75% of the student population that was there. After they did the new admissions policy, Asian Americans dropped from that percentage down to between 52 and 54. So they were still a majority of the population. It just wasn't as high. White population went up, Black population went up, and Hispanic population went up as well. And what you said earlier, Sheila, is very true. That the Asian population, though it dropped, the number of disadvantaged Asian Americans went way up. So across the spectrum, the school became more diverse, both in race, culture, and economic status, which is what you want, right? I mean, I'm asking our audience, that's what you want, right? You don't want a school where it's nothing but the wealthiest people are allowed to go there because, number one, they can pay for testing programs. They can pay the admissions fee, right? And all this kind of stuff. And one last thing on this before we take a quick break. This is a public school. This is not a private school where they get to decide about their admissions and only have, no. This is a public school. It's just a very good public school. And I think that some people have gotten into this knowledge that because they're of such a status that they deserve to go, right? That there's some privilege there based upon the makeup of the community and wealth. So anyway, wow. So much more to talk about. We're running out of time here. Listen, we're going to take a very, very quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about, where do we see this fight going, right? What's some of the ideas that we have about that? So we'll be right back in about a minute or so. Soulivity Today is brought to you by Assume control over your weight and broader health with the 80 Bites program by Physical Mind Institute.
For 50 years, we've been told, load up your plate with veggies. Load them up. Because all this spinach, look at it, all the spinach is only 100 calories. But avoid fat, because a tiny sliver of butter is also 100 calories. So spinach is good, butter is bad, right? But not today. Now we're told, put butter on everything, even in your coffee. Why? Because fat doesn't spike insulin, as carbs do. And stretching the stomach with all those veggies unbalances our digestive hormones. So eat healthy today means fat, fasting, stomach control, right here's the stomach. Forget calories. Hormones rule, and 80 bites is the solution.
And we're back with more of Soulivity today. Wow, ladies, you know, so much to talk about, so little time. Where do we see this fight going in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Do we want to frame this in terms of public schools, or do we want to go broader? And I'll leave that up to each one of you. And Sheila, I'll go with you first.
So where I see it going, because I choose to place my attention on what I want to happen, is that more and more of our society, even if it does go to the Supreme Court, that they would rule that, like, this is not race, this is not affirmative action, you can't put this in race, because it really is a neutral race policy. And we could start to see not only schools, but workplaces and society as a whole starting to identify and move beyond the image of race as the deciding factor and look at the diversity in human gifts and human cognitive levels and how they are expressed, so that through that process, when we start I could go on the whole thing about school too. When we start like actually using our schools to teach people how to live in a beautiful society and how to not just be submissive to a system, when this happens, then the whole world, our whole society changes in all the systemic areas with which we are currently suppressing.
Yeah, I love that. What about you, Sinead? Where do you see this going?
All right, well, I have a two-part there. As my dear friend and colleague said earlier, this really is about the systemic racism of people, the haves, who are just so thoroughly afraid of losing their privileges. I mean, I hope I'm not misconstruing what you said, Sheila, but they're just terrified that all of these things that they have and they get and that are kind of bestowed on them, they're just freaking out because all of a sudden they're just so worried that everyone's going to get a seat at the table. So they're just they're doing everything they can to, circle the wagons and keep people in lower socioeconomic classes. And that's a lot of what racism is. It's just kind of like we're afraid and we want to keep the rest of y'all down. So I'm worried that the fight is going to be on that side, that they're going to keep doing things like bringing it up to places like the Supreme Court, where right now it's a friendly venue. And I'm very worried that they might take a case like this. And my first concern about that is that they would take this and accept it and review it. And that would be like their second bite at the apple, which is like their chance to kind of write new law. And they shouldn't do that. They're meant to review law, but kind of write the law and say, okay, this is what race neutral means. Because they didn't do that in the last case. And so that's where I fear that it's going. But where the idealist sees it going is exactly here where Thomas Jefferson has been going, stepping up to the plate, saying, you know what, we're seeing a change in America. We want equity. We want inclusion. We want to change our policies and bring everyone in. So that's where I see it going. You know, and it's, you know, the fight, the good, the bad, the everything, and I see the good winning.
Right.
I hope.
Yeah, me too. I think that and thank you both for that, for those thoughts. I really, you know, I can't see the Supreme Court taking up this case unless it's in a very, very narrow way. Because they would be, if they take up the case and rule against it, right? They say, no, you have to change your admissions policy, right? I can't see them doing that without contradicting themselves in terms of the ruling that they just had for affirmative action, right?
Right.
And so I think that there's probably discussions going on between the justices around this, saying, do we really want to open up this can of worms? Even Amy Berry Cohen, right? Even her, where she's like, where she may be thinking, do we really want to open this Pandora's box, right? Especially right before an election where there could be laws that are passed to try to quote unquote fix all of this stuff. I don't think they're going to take it up. I really, really don't. I think that they're going to bite the bullet and deny taking this specific case up, because when you look at what the school has done over a long period of time, they've really come up with a really excellent way of taking in all the factors of systematic racism and discrimination and putting them in a package where it's like, we're not taking race, but here are some of the things that we need to take in terms of looking at people individualistically and the communities that they come from, right? And so that they have a more beautiful, as you said, Sinead, a more beautiful admissions policy around all this. One last thing on this too, I was thinking about, I was part of a project that was looking at diversity on some government contracts. And one of the contracts that they were looking at was like one for NASA. And what was completely shocking for me was that when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, some of the people in the room who were non-people of color were confused as to why do we need to include that? It just be the best of the best and such at NASA. And when I mentioned to them, I asked them, hey, do you know the story of Katherine Johnson? None of them knew who Katherine Johnson was.
Oh my gosh.
And we're talking a NASA contract, right? And then I said, well, did you see the movie, Hidden Figures? None of them had seen the movie Hidden Figures, and none of them knew about any of it. And so I had to explain to them the power of, even though there was still discrimination, those things, they were segregated at that time and then became desegregated at NASA, because they found out that, listen, there's all this talent that's available, right, of people who actually have know-how and capability and abilities that we're literally shooting ourselves in the foot by not inviting in people from these diverse backgrounds that are come from, like, over time they've become the best of the best of the best, but they look at problems differently. They just look at things differently. And so I just wanted to kind of bring that to the subject line here. Listen, while we have some time, so thank you for both for having this discussion with me. I really, really appreciate both of you. Why don't we get to some shameless plugs while we have a little bit of time here. Sinead, can you tell people a little bit about the work that you're doing at Racial Fairness Berkshires?
Yes, thank you so much. We are a nonprofit charity here in Western Massachusetts. We try to revolutionize giving by soliciting money and resources from the white community, the privileged many, and we take that and we give it to, or we have it concentrated in our entirely Black, Brown, and minority distribution committee, because they decide where to give it out. Because, as we like to say, white people are the ones who made the problems. We cannot fix it. And we also spend a lot of time doing educational presentations, and we have conversations, and we attend a lot of events, because we do think that the only way to break systemic racism is through education, because a lot of people, we're born with this privilege, but we don't even realize it.
Wow. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And Sheila, really quickly, got about a minute. Can you tell people about the upcoming Matrix?
Yeah. So, one of the reasons that I am a host in these conversations is because I think that when we bring a bigger picture to the common everyday frustrations, we have a new way of experiencing life. So in the Matrix of Illumination, which is on September 8th, here on Aspire at Soulivity, we'll be doing a meditation and opening up for divine inspiration to help everyone sort of move to a new way of perceiving and understanding the struggles that are happening in this world. So come join me there.
I love it. Thank you so much for that. And thank to both of you. Such a robust conversation today. I know this won't be the last thing that we'll be talking about in terms of all this. We'll be keeping our eye on the Supreme Court, right? In terms of what they're going to be doing in the future. So thank you to both of you. Listen, and thanks to all of you for joining us for this edition of Soulivity Today. Again, we hope that you come back and join us every weekday at 8 a.m. Eastern, right here at soulivity.com for our live broadcast, or you can listen to us at 8 a.m. Eastern Pacific time on KMET 1490 AM radio in Southern California. For all of you on the West Coast, listen, keep having these kind of conversations, everybody. I mean, talk about these things within your own community, within your family, friends. These are important conversations to have. Educate yourself, be curious about what's happening in the world, especially things like this that don't get too much media attention. And always, we are wishing you a life full of passion, purpose to create a best life, your life of high quality living today. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
This work is subject to copyright owned by Affinity Global LLC. Any reproduction or republication of all or part of this is expressly prohibited unless Affinity Global LLC has explicitly granted its prior written consent. All other rights reserved.